up, you guys? It's Caleb from the Plastic Underground. Back again this week with another build for you. This week I'm working on something from one of my favorite games of all time, Fallout 3. This week we are working on the Alien Blaster. It's an all foam build with a little bit of plastic tube for the barrel. Came out pretty good, and let's get to it and I'll show you how I made it. Alright, you guys, so this week I am using a pepakura file. I found a pepakura file for this Alien Blaster online, so that is what I am using. I will try to put in the descriptions below a link to that file if I can find it again. I've had this saved for a long time. I've had this file for a long time, just never felt up to the challenge of doing it, but I finally got around to doing it, and it really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I was just always been intimidated by this gun, the shape of it, and getting it to be perfectly round with foam, but it came out pretty good. So the body of the gun looks like these fingers, and so it's pretty time consuming putting glue on both sides, using contact cement to put glue on both sides, and I just slowly go through and I glue those all together. I close the circle off for the back, and this piece I cut in half to fit on my foam sheet better. I didn't want to waste a bunch of room by having two of these big shapes, so I cut this in half just so I could have more room. But it's just one more spot you have to glue, so it's not too big of a deal. That way you can get rid of a lot of your scrap foam without using a full sheet of foam for small stuff like this. So just like with the other half, I glued this half all together. Then I take that half and I glue it to the other half. I start in the back and I work my way towards the front. Then I like to stick the edge together so I know exactly where they have to be, and then I work my way back towards the back end. That way I know the back and the front is exactly glued where it is, and if there's any wiggle room in between, it just stretches to fit. So this is the bottom body part. This is basically just the spot where all of the fins and ridges go on the front. So this circle gets glued together. And then all these fins get glued together too. When I'm using pepakura files, I like to keep the pepakura file up so I can look at the 3-dimension of it, of how all the shapes go together, where they go together. But I also like to have a few good reference images of the actual thing too, so while I'm putting stuff together I know what to change, things that should be there, things that shouldn't be there, and if anything is recessed or proud. This is actually the hardest part of this entire gun, was putting this body cap in here. would have been easier probably to use super glue, but also I wanted it to be stuck and not come apart and hold shape like permanently. So I start by putting the corners in there, and then I work my way towards this smaller circle, making sure the corners match the corner lines on the piece itself. I should have cut like bevels on the back of this piece so that it would fold a little bit better, but in the end it gave me a better shape. It gave me a good solid cap for this piece. And I do end up using super glue on a little bit of this part here just to tack it all together. So you can see that little spot there. I just used some super glue. I don't know if the contact cement didn't get applied to that part or if it dried out before I glued it, but I might have even had it stuck down and had to peel it up so that it was not misshapen. These are the side circles. It's actually like the ammo cell. This is for the right side. It gets a piece of 2mm foam on top of it. That side isn't where the ammo goes. It's a detail, but it looks just like the other side, but it's not as thick. So I put 2mm on that side, and for the other side here, I put a piece of 5mm foam on top. So now these are part of the, man, what would you even call them? They're like fins, but they're on the barrel of the gun. They're just these pieces of, they're supposed to be like pieces of metal. They make it look super sci-fi, super 50s and 60s sci-fi, where all that kind of stuff had these like fins and washers that looked like the only word I can think of is fins, but I don't know. So they get glued on together like that. That's how they'll look on the barrel. That circle on the left side, the ammo cell there, I'm just sanding it smooth. And also I put a 45-degree bevel on the top of that circle. Then I go through and I sand the entire body. I get the whole body smooth. All the ridges and stuff that are sticking up, I get all level and flat. Especially with all those the fingers that you glued together, they all get sanded smooth. That bottom piece gets glued on. I use some super glue for this, just because basically once you tack it in place, you just hold it for a second and it'll stay. So I have a little bit more wiggle room and movability. I can kind of move it where I want it a little bit longer than with contact cement. So then I just kind of push it together and hold it, and it's already stuck. A super glue that I use is really good. It's some of the best super glue I've found. It works really well for foam. This is the bottom piece. This is where the trigger and handle will go eventually. This I do use contact cement for. I marked where I wanted it first. I put glue on both sides, and then I slowly go through and I glue this together. So now it's all together and it looks like a blimp. So these are some like little shot tubes. I've used these before. I've used the bottoms of these in my Star Trek panel build, and I had this left over. This is the rest of the tube. I cut the bottom off of that build, so I used this tube for the barrel of the gun. It was actually the perfect size, so that was pretty sweet. I got to reuse this. So now I start to glue the side circles on. You can see I marked them with a pen where I want them to go first, just so I can get them kind of lined up one side to the other. The ammo side has that little square detail on there, or rectangle detail. I glue the other side on. Now with these fins on the front, I glue one side. The first one here, I glued the whole thing down. But the rest of them, I glue each side. I glue them all on the one side of the body. That way, when I glue them over on the other side, I can see exactly where they have to go to be spaced out evenly without, that way I didn't have to draw the lines all the way around. I kind of knew where they wanted to go. This is a piece of 10mm foam. I used a marker cap to cut that circle out. Glued it on the back. I used this thin sanding drum to go in and shape the trigger. The handle is 10mm foam, and the two side grip pieces are 6mm foam. I glue those on, and I just go around with some sandpaper, some sanding drum, and I just round them out. So now with the barrel, the front of the barrel has this it's not a perfect circle. It's more of a oval shape. So I just glue a piece of 5mm on the front, and then I sand off the top of that like smooth, so it's kind of beveled, so it's not just a rigid line. And then I put some 4mm on top of that all the way around the barrel itself. That way it gives me that weird oblong oval shape. You'll see me glue all this stuff together. I actually went through after and I sanded the front of that piece down so it was a little bit recessed, and I also sanded in some of the ridge lines for the detail on the front. But for now, I glue those front fins on the front, and this sight that goes on the front of the barrel. So yeah, when I fixed and sanded the front of that, I cut that sight off and everything. But it's just something that you'll see as you go. You'll see how it's supposed to look and things that you change sometimes even after you glue stuff together, you're not happy with the way it looks, so you take stuff apart and fix it. So there's the barrel end, the trigger and handle is going on now. I marked where I wanted that to go. I used some contact cement. If this is going to be something that you're going to be carrying around and holding on to, I would put like a coat hanger or something stiff in the center of your handle and into the body, because this is a little floppy, but it's also, for me, I'm just putting it on the shelf with all my other Fallout stuff. So you can see I put the trigger in there, and then these are some circle details that I cut out with a pen cap. I have a bunch of different markers and pens that I use for cutting out circles. I'll have to do a video sometime on that, how I do a lot of those. I'm using the wood burner here, and I'm going through and I'm putting in some of these detail panels and lines. Make sure you wear a respirator when you're doing this too. This stuff is really bad to breathe in. Even when I'm like in the office working on stuff, doing stuff, and my wife is like in the living room or the bedroom, she'll complain of the smell if I don't have like the window cracked. So yeah, so if you're right above this looking at it like I am, you definitely don't want to be breathing that stuff in. So this is the top fin that goes on the top of the gun. It's just kind of showing that real quick, showing how I glued 2 pieces of 5mm on the side of that. So these are the handle fins. Like I said, it's really 50s, 60s sci-fi. Everything has ridges, everything has fins and square, round details like that. So I glue all these on the handle, and I go through and I kind of sand them a little bit to bevel them so they're not a sharp triangle, not triangle, so they're not a sharp rectangle cut, so they're more rounded. Those early 50s things were square, straight cut, and rounded at the same time somehow, so that's what gives it that sci-fi, 50s sci-fi feel. Straight lines and bevels and circular details. So there's the top fin glued on. Now this thing on the side, I have no idea what it is. Alright, then I just used a piece of wire. I think this is like 20 gauge wire. I use that and I bend it and I glue it down in place to both of those little square, or not square, both of those little round circles. So that is the full construction of the alien blaster. So now I seal this in Plasti Dip. With Plasti Dip, I try to just put on a couple light layers at first, and then I go back through and I put on heavier coats of it. Now I'm just using some metallic silver, just spraying the whole gun with that silver. It's one of those builds where it's actually pretty nice. This whole gun is just one solid color, pretty much for the most part. Now, since this is Fallout, I go through and I weather it a lot. Even though it came from space and it's like new tech, it's in the world of Fallout, so it's designed to be dirty and rusty and greasy and all that kind of stuff. So I just mix up some brown and black, and I put that on pretty thick. I go through, wipe most of it away. You can see how I keep a lot of it in like the ridges and the crevices of stuff. I do that for the whole gun. Now I take this sea sponge here for painting, and I mix up a little bit of that paint. Tap most of it off. My goal with this is just to try to dab it on to make it look like some dirt, some rust spots. Just gives it a little bit of texture, a little bit of uniform that kind of contrasts the rest of the paint. So I just sparingly dab that around. If there's areas where I think it's too much, I go through and I just knock it down with my rag. So then I use some of this turquoise paint here. In the game, these are all lights. They all light up, and I'd love to do that. I'd love to make it light up, but I did not feel like doing that with this. I think if I ever 3D print this, which I plan on eventually, I would love to make it a two-part print and put lights and everything, make the ammo cell come out, all that kind of stuff. But for now, I just paint this turquoise on here, and it looks pretty good. Then I mix up a little bit of orange with some of that brown, and I just dab some more of that on there just to look like some rust. And that is it for the paint. That is it for the build. There you have it. Super happy with the way this came out. One of my favorite guns from Fallout 3. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.